Mother Teresa of Calcutta, born Agnes Gongsa, entered the world on August 26, 1910, in Skopje, then part of the Ottoman Empire and now the capital of North Macedonia. Her early life unfolded in a diverse cultural and religious environment, which deeply influenced her spiritual formation and outlook. The Bojaxiu family was of Albanian descent and deeply rooted in the Roman Catholic faith, providing a nurturing atmosphere where Agnes's religious sensibilities could take root from a young age. The socio-political climate of early 20th century Skopje was marked by instability, ethnic tensions, and the aftermath of the Balkan Wars. Despite these challenges, Agnes grew up in a relatively comfortable middle-class household. Her father, Nikola Bojaxiu, was a successful businessman and politician, which afforded the family a stable livelihood and social standing. Nevertheless, the Bojaxiu home emphasized charity and service, values that would later shape Agnes's vocation. Agnes displayed a strong sense of empathy and spirituality even as a child. She was known to attend Mass regularly and was deeply moved by the suffering she observed in her surroundings. The early loss of her father, when she was only 8 years old, marked a significant emotional moment in her life. This event, coupled with her mother's unwavering faith and resilience, reinforced Agnes's early commitment to religious devotion and service to others. Her education at a local Catholic school, run by the Sisters of Loreto, further nurtured her religious vocation. The influence of the nuns, who embodied a life dedicated to prayer and service, was critical in her decision to pursue a religious life. Agnes was particularly inspired by stories of missionary work and the possibility of dedicating herself to a cause greater than personal ambition or comfort. By the age of 18, Agnes had made a firm decision to leave her home and join the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland, an initial step toward her missionary aspirations. This decision reflected a profound inner conviction to serve beyond the familiar confines of her upbringing. Her move to Ireland was a significant transition, marking the beginning of her spiritual journey toward India and her eventual global impact. The choice to become a missionary was not made lightly. It was the culmination of years of spiritual reflection and a desire to address human suffering. Agnes's early life reveals a pattern of selflessness and commitment, which would define her character in the decades to come. This period also illustrates the intersection of personal faith and broader cultural influences that shaped her worldview. In addition to religious influences, Agnes's family life played a crucial role in forming her identity. Her mother, Dranophile Bojaxiu, was a source of inspiration, embodying the virtues of patience, charity, and endurance. The close-knit family structure emphasized the importance of community and care for the vulnerable, laying the groundwork for Agnes's later work with the poor. Her formative years were also marked by exposure to the political upheavals and social inequalities that afflicted the Balkans, providing her with a first-hand understanding of hardship. This context contributed to her lifelong commitment to alleviating suffering regardless of race, religion, or nationality. Agnes's ability to transcend ethnic and cultural divides can be traced back to this early multicultural and politically charged environment. The decision of Agnes Gongsa Bojaxiu to join the Sisters of Loreto marked the beginning of a transformative journey, both physically and spiritually. At the age of 18, she left her home in Skopje for Ireland, where she would enter the Loreto Abbey in Rathfarnham, near Dublin. This move was significant not only as a geographical relocation, but also as a deliberate step toward embracing a life dedicated to religious service. The Abbey, with its austere routines and contemplative atmosphere, became Agnes's first immersion into formal religious life. In Ireland, Agnes was given the name Sister Mary Teresa, inspired by Saint Therese of Lisieux, whose devotion to simplicity and humility resonated deeply with her. Her training involved rigorous spiritual formation, academic studies, and learning the practical skills necessary for missionary work. The environment at Loreto was both challenging and nurturing, fostering a strong discipline of prayer, community living, and obedience to religious authority. After completing her novitiate, Sister Teresa was sent to India, arriving in Calcutta in January 1929. The transition from the relatively comfortable setting of Ireland to the chaotic and impoverished city of Calcutta was stark. Calcutta, then the capital of British India, was a sprawling metropolis marked by extreme poverty, social stratification, and colonial tensions. For Sister Teresa, this was the stage where her missionary vocation would unfold in unprecedented ways. Initially, she taught at St. Mary's High School for Girls in Calcutta, an institution managed by the Loreto Sisters. Here, she spent nearly 2 decades educating young women, many of whom came from wealthy and middle-class families. This work, while fulfilling, soon led her to question whether teaching alone was sufficient to address the suffering she witnessed outside the school's walls. The disparity between the lives of her students and the desperate conditions in the slums weighed heavily on her conscience. During these years, Sister Teresa's spirituality deepened, rooted in prayer and meditation. She was known for her humility and dedication, spending hours in contemplation. However, she became increasingly aware of a profound inner calling, a call within a call, that would redefine her mission. This call was characterized by a compelling urge to leave the comfort of the convent and immerse herself directly in the lives of the poorest and most marginalized people. This inner summons culminated in 1946 during a train journey from Calcutta to Darjeeling, where she experienced a moment of intense clarity. Sister Teresa later described this event as a divine directive to abandon her convent life and serve the poorest of the poor in the slums of Calcutta. The experience was both a spiritual awakening and a profound challenge, requiring her to rethink her identity and purpose as a religious sister. The years following this revelation were marked by intense prayer, discernment, and preparation. Sister Teresa sought permission from her superiors to leave the Loreto convent and embark on this new path. This request was unusual and met with hesitation, as it defied conventional expectations for a religious sister. Nonetheless, her resolve and clarity of purpose prevailed, and she received the approval needed to pursue her new mission. In 1948, Sister Teresa left the convent, adopting the simple white sari edged with blue, the distinctive habit that would become a symbol of her mission. She began living among the destitute in Calcutta's slums, sharing in their hardships and tending to their needs firsthand. This marked the official beginning of her work as a caregiver and advocate for the marginalized, moving beyond the walls of institutionalized charity. Her initial efforts were modest but impactful, visiting the sick, feeding the hungry, and providing comfort to those abandoned by society. Sister Teresa's presence was radical in its simplicity and compassion, embodying a hands-on approach that challenged prevailing attitudes toward poverty and suffering. This early phase laid the groundwork for the expansive humanitarian work she would undertake in the coming decades. The year 1946 was a watershed moment in the life of Sister Teresa, marking a profound transformation in her spiritual journey and life's work. During a train ride from Calcutta to Darjeeling in the foothills of the Himalayas, she experienced what she would later describe as a call within a call, a deeply personal and mystical encounter that reshaped her understanding of her vocation. This awakening was more than a simple inspiration. It was a decisive moment of clarity and mission that demanded radical change. As the train sped through the misty mountains, Sister Teresa felt an overwhelming conviction that God was asking her to leave the convent walls and dedicate herself entirely to the service of the poorest and most abandoned people of Calcutta. This message was not merely a suggestion, but a compelling command, accompanied by a sense of divine urgency and clarity that she could neither ignore nor reinterpret. The stark contrast between her sheltered convent life and the suffering she witnessed daily became undeniable. This spiritual experience ignited an intense inner struggle. Sister Teresa grappled with the implications of such a drastic departure from her existing role as a teacher and convent nun. She was acutely aware of the sacrifices involved, forsaking the security and structure of convent life, embracing poverty, and exposing herself to the harsh realities of the streets. Nonetheless, the clarity of her mission overpowered her doubts and fears. Upon returning to Calcutta, she began a period of prayerful discernment and consultation with her spiritual directors and superiors. This process was neither quick nor easy, as her request to leave the convent and live among the destitute challenged the traditional expectations of her religious order. Her superiors were initially hesitant, concerned about the practical and theological ramifications of such a path. However, Sister Teresa's unwavering faith and compelling sense of purpose eventually secured their reluctant approval. With permission granted, Sister Teresa set about preparing for this new chapter. She discarded her elaborate convent attire for a simple white sari with a blue border, a garment that symbolized humility, purity, and solidarity with the poor. This outward transformation reflected a deeper internal commitment to live in absolute identification with those she intended to serve. The early days of her mission were marked by uncertainty and immense challenges. Lacking financial resources, institutional support, or formal structures, she relied on faith and sheer determination. She started by visiting the slums of Calcutta, areas rife with disease, starvation, and neglect. These neighborhoods were often overlooked by society and the authorities, inhabited by those whom many considered beyond help. Despite these hardships, Sister Teresa's approach was characterized by compassion and respect. She refused to view the poor merely as objects of charity, instead recognizing their inherent dignity and worth. Her method was not only to provide physical aid, but also to offer emotional and spiritual companionship, an affirmation of life even in the face of death and despair. Her presence in the slums quickly attracted attention, both from the local population and from others in the missionary community. The contrast between her gentle care and the harsh conditions she embraced was striking. This period laid the foundation for her future work, establishing principles of solidarity, service, and humility that would define her approach for decades to come. Following the profound spiritual awakening and her initial work in the slums of Calcutta, Sister Teresa recognized the need for an organized framework to sustain and expand her mission. Her experiences demonstrated that individual effort, while impactful, could only reach a limited number of people. To broaden her humanitarian outreach, she envisioned a religious congregation dedicated exclusively to serving the poorest of the poor, a community of like-minded individuals who would share her commitment to radical poverty and compassionate service. In 1950, this vision materialized with the founding of the Missionaries of Charity. The nascent congregation began with just a handful of members, including Sister Teresa herself. Their mission was clear yet daunting: to live among the destitute, care for the sick and dying, and provide shelter to those rejected by society. This new religious order was distinctive not only for its mission, but also for its emphasis on living the gospel through direct action and presence in the margins. The initial years of the Missionaries of Charity were marked by severe financial constraints and skepticism from the local church hierarchy. Many questioned the viability of such a radical lifestyle and doubted the ability of a small group of nuns to make a lasting difference amidst overwhelming poverty. Nonetheless, Sister Teresa's unwavering faith, charisma, and practical resourcefulness gradually garnered support from donors, volunteers, and the church. Central to the order's identity was the vow of poverty taken by its members, which went beyond the traditional monastic poverty to include total dependence on divine providence and public generosity. The sisters wore a simple white sari edged with blue, symbolizing purity and service, and they renounced all personal possessions. This radical embrace of poverty was both a spiritual discipline and a visible sign of solidarity with the impoverished communities they served. The Missionaries of Charity quickly established their first home for the dying in Calcutta, known as the Nirmal Hriday, Pure Heart Hospice. It became a sanctuary for those abandoned by their families and society. Here, the sisters provided medical care, comfort, and dignity to the terminally ill, many of whom had been left to die on the streets. This initiative was groundbreaking, as it challenged prevailing social attitudes that marginalized the sick and dying as untouchables or burdens. Education and outreach soon followed as additional ministries were developed. The sisters began caring for lepers, homeless children, and victims of natural disasters. Their approach was holistic, addressing physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. This comprehensive care model distinguished the Missionaries of Charity from other charitable organizations, which often focused solely on material aid. The congregation's rapid growth attracted attention both within India and internationally. By the mid-1950s, new vocations increased, allowing the sisters to open houses in other parts of India. Sister Teresa's ability to inspire and organize was crucial to this expansion. She maintained a strict discipline in the community, emphasizing prayer, simplicity, and service as pillars of their life together. Despite the growth, challenges persisted. The sisters often faced hostility and suspicion from local authorities and some community members. Their presence in slums and marginalized areas disrupted entrenched social hierarchies and provoked resistance. Moreover, the harsh conditions under which they worked led to physical exhaustion and emotional strain among the members, testing their resolve and commitment. The foundation of the Missionaries of Charity marked the beginning of a new phase for Mother Teresa, one defined by intense immersion in the daily realities of the poorest communities in Calcutta. Her work went far beyond charitable acts. It was a radical presence in the lives of those whom society had largely forgotten. Living among the poor, Mother Teresa embraced their conditions fully, sharing their physical environment, daily struggles, and spiritual needs. Mother Teresa's days were long and physically demanding. She rose before dawn, dedicating hours to prayer and reflection, which she regarded as the source of her strength and compassion. After this spiritual preparation, she and her fellow sisters ventured into the slums, hospitals, and streets. The environments were often unsanitary, filled with disease, filth, and suffering that most people found unbearable. Yet, Mother Teresa moved through these spaces with a calm determination and unwavering empathy. Her approach to the poor was deeply personal and hands-on. She did not delegate the work to others, but personally washed the wounds of the sick, fed the starving, and comforted the dying. This level of direct involvement was radical, especially at a time when many charity efforts were distanced by bureaucracy or institutional barriers. She believed that every human being deserved dignity and care, regardless of their social status or condition. The sick and dying became central to her mission. Many of those she cared for were abandoned by their families or rejected by hospitals. Mother Teresa's homes became refuges for those who had nowhere else to turn, places where they could spend their final days in peace and with human kindness. This work was emotionally taxing, but Mother Teresa regarded it as a sacred duty, a way to serve Christ in the distressing disguise of the poor. In addition to physical care, Mother Teresa emphasized the importance of listening and presence. She understood that many of the poor suffered from profound loneliness and social isolation. Her simple acts, holding a hand, offering a smile, or sitting quietly with someone, often provided comfort beyond what medicine could offer. This holistic care set her work apart and fostered deep bonds of trust and respect. As the missionaries of charity expanded, Mother Teresa established several homes for different groups in need: lepers, orphan children, refugees, and victims of natural disasters. Each facility was tailored to address specific needs, but all shared the core values of compassion, humility, and service. These institutions became lifelines for thousands and serve as models for humanitarian work worldwide. Despite the challenges of poverty, Mother Teresa's work was characterized by simplicity and efficiency. She insisted on careful stewardship of resources, encouraging donations, but also demanding that aid be used directly to help those in need rather than for administrative costs. This approach won her admiration and financial support from individuals and organizations globally. Mother Teresa's work also involved advocacy, though she was careful to maintain a humble public profile. She sought to bring awareness to the plight of the poor through quiet persistence rather than loud protest. Her presence and testimony spoke volumes, influencing public opinion and inspiring many to engage in charitable work. The emotional and physical toll of this work was immense. Mother Teresa often faced exhaustion, illness, and discouragement, yet she remained steadfast. Her resilience was bolstered by her faith, prayer, and the support of the sisters who shared her mission. Together, they forged a community united by a profound commitment to alleviate suffering. The remarkable success of the missionaries of charity in Calcutta soon led to growing recognition and an urgent need to expand their work beyond India's borders. As word spread about the dedication and effectiveness of Mother Teresa and her sisters, requests for assistance began to arrive from various parts of the world. The early 1960s marked the beginning of a new chapter in which the missionaries of charity transformed from a localized congregation into a global humanitarian force. Mother Teresa embraced the challenge with characteristic humility and determination. She understood that poverty was a universal problem transcending cultural, political, and religious boundaries. This global vision reflected her deep conviction that all human beings, regardless of background, deserve care and compassion. Thus, the missionaries of charity began establishing houses and centers in other countries, adapting their services to meet diverse local needs. The first international expansion occurred in Venezuela in 1965, where a small community of sisters was sent to care for the poor in Caracas. This initial venture tested the congregation's ability to operate in a different cultural and linguistic context, but it also affirmed the universal applicability of their mission. The sisters' willingness to immerse themselves in local communities mirrored Mother Teresa's own approach in Calcutta, living simply, serving directly, and forging close connections. Following Venezuela, new houses opened in several countries, including Tanzania, Rome, and the United States. In each location, the missionaries of charity focused on serving the most marginalized: homeless people, lepers, refugees, and the dying abandoned by society. This expansion necessitated an increase in recruitment and training of new sisters, many of whom came from diverse cultural and national backgrounds, enriching the congregation's character. Mother Teresa's leadership style was marked by delegation balanced with personal involvement. While she entrusted local sisters with managing day-to-day operations, she continued to visit new and established missions regularly, offering guidance and encouragement. Her presence was a unifying force, inspiring commitment and sustaining morale amid often difficult conditions. International media also played a significant role in publicizing the missionaries of charity's work, attracting support and volunteers worldwide. Mother Teresa became a recognizable figure, often referred to as a living saint, though she remained focused on her mission rather than public acclaim. The increasing global attention brought financial aid and resources that allowed the order to open hospitals, orphanages, and rehabilitation centers in impoverished areas. The congregation's growth also led to collaborations with other humanitarian organizations and governments. Despite occasional bureaucratic obstacles and cultural challenges, Mother Teresa's reputation as a sincere and effective advocate for the poor helped facilitate partnerships that expanded the reach of their services. The missionaries of charity became known not only for their direct care, but also for their ability to mobilize resources and influence social policy. In addition to expanding geographically, the congregation diversified its services. Beyond healthcare and shelter, they began addressing issues such as education, HIV/AIDS care, and disaster relief. Their flexibility and responsiveness to emerging global crises underscore the adaptability of Mother Teresa's original vision to evolving humanitarian needs. The international growth of the missionaries of charity also had spiritual implications. The order's rapid expansion necessitated deeper institutional structures, including formalized training programs and a clear governance framework, to maintain cohesion and fidelity to their founding charism. Mother Teresa was actively involved in shaping these developments, ensuring that the core values of humility, simplicity, and service remained central. As the missionaries of charity extended their reach across continents, Mother Teresa's relentless compassion and selfless service began to draw widespread international attention. Though she never sought the limelight, her authenticity and unwavering dedication to the poorest of the poor resonated deeply with people of all faiths and backgrounds. In a world increasingly fractured by politics, inequality, and indifference, she emerged as a rare unifying figure, someone who embodied the ideals of mercy, humility, and peace. Mother Teresa's recognition on the global stage began in earnest during the 1970s, as her work started to be highlighted in international media. Documentaries, news reports, and biographies brought her image into the homes of millions, portraying a woman who moved through slums with unmatched tenderness, treating the dying with the same reverence given to kings. Her words, often simple yet profound, were quoted around the world. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. This exposure naturally led to numerous awards and honors. One of the most significant acknowledgments came in 1979, when she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The committee cited her work in combating poverty and distress, which they described as a threat to peace. At the awards ceremony in Oslo, Mother Teresa used the platform not to celebrate herself, but to speak for the voiceless. She challenged the world to see the faces of the forgotten and to respond not with pity, but with action grounded in love. In a characteristic gesture of humility, she requested that the traditional Nobel banquet be canceled and that the funds be redirected to serve the poor. She stood before dignitaries and global leaders in her modest sari, a visual contrast that underscored the sincerity of her message. Her speech, devoid of pretense, called abortion the greatest destroyer of peace and stirred controversy. Yet it was consistent with her deeply held beliefs and unwavering advocacy for the sanctity of life. Beyond formal accolades, her influence seeped into various spheres of global culture and politics. Heads of state, spiritual leaders, and philanthropists sought her counsel. Despite her petite stature and soft voice, she often stood firm in conversations with presidents and kings, urging them to look beyond policies and budgets to consider the human beings affected by their decisions. Her ability to speak truth to power without hostility became one of her defining strengths. In the religious world, Mother Teresa became a bridge between denominations and faiths. Though a devout Catholic, she worked harmoniously with Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and people of no religious affiliation. Her focus was not on conversion, but on service. She believed love and compassion transcended dogma. Her universal appeal made her a spiritual figure beyond the confines of her church, admired by believers and skeptics alike. Artists, poets, and authors drew inspiration from her life. Books were written, films produced, and academic lectures delivered that sought to capture her essence. Often, they described her as a modern-day saint, a paradoxical combination of radical action and deep contemplation. Her legacy began to influence the way humanitarian work was perceived, shifting the focus from institutional intervention to personal responsibility and intimate care. Mother Teresa also began mentoring the next generation of missionaries of charity and other aspiring volunteers around the world. She frequently emphasized the importance of presence over productivity, reminding people that being with the suffering was as valuable as solving their problems. This perspective challenged the modern efficiency-driven approach to charity and reintroduced the notion of compassionate attention as a sacred act. Despite her global fame, she remained deeply connected to the communities she served. When not traveling, she continued to live in the small, austere rooms of the Calcutta Mother House. Visitors were often astonished by the simplicity of her surroundings: bare walls, a wooden bed, and a crucifix. Even with the world's admiration at her feet, she chose to remain rooted in the very humility that had shaped her mission from the beginning. As her public stature grew and the missionaries of charity expanded into new corners of the globe, Mother Teresa also faced profound personal trials, physical, emotional, and spiritual, that quietly shadowed her journey of service. Behind her ever-present smile and gentle demeanor, there existed a side of her life largely hidden from the public eye. Years marked by illness, exhaustion, and an unexpected spiritual desolation that tested her faith to its core. By the late 1980s, age and decades of intense labor had begun to take their toll on Mother Teresa's health. She suffered her first major heart attack in 1983 while visiting Pope John Paul II in Rome. Though she recovered, it marked the beginning of a series of health complications that would follow her for the rest of her life. In 1989, another heart attack led doctors to implant a pacemaker. Despite her frailty, she refused to slow down, continuing her travel schedule and community visits with remarkable tenacity. Her physical ailments were compounded by frequent bouts of fatigue, malaria, and later, lung and kidney problems. Often, she had to be persuaded by her sisters and doctors to rest. She preferred to spend her remaining strength on the sick and abandoned rather than on her own recovery. To her, physical suffering was a form of solidarity with the people she served, a sacrificial offering, not something to be avoided. Far more hidden, however, was the spiritual trial that she endured for decades. After her initial spiritual calling in 1946, Mother Teresa experienced what theologians describe as a prolonged dark night of the soul. In private letters that only became public years after her death, she confessed to feeling an overwhelming sense of God's absence. She described her interior life as a void, a darkness, and a torture in which she could no longer feel the presence of Christ despite her unwavering external faith and devotion. This spiritual dryness persisted for nearly 50 years. While she continued to serve with dedication, her writings revealed an inner torment, a sense of abandonment, and a struggle to reconcile her lack of spiritual consolation with the mission she had been given. Yet, she did not allow this inner void to paralyze her. On the contrary, it became a source of profound empathy. Her own suffering helped her identify more intimately with the forgotten and forsaken. Few around her were aware of this burden. To her sisters, she remained a pillar of encouragement and hope. She carried her darkness silently, offering it as part of her vocation, convinced that suffering, when embraced in love, could become redemptive. Her ability to continue her work despite this internal desolation only deepened the moral and spiritual force of her life. It showed a faith not based on feeling, but on fidelity. Administratively, the growing size of the missionaries of charity also presented challenges. As new branches formed and lay volunteers joined in greater numbers, Mother Teresa had to navigate tensions between maintaining the order's original spirit and adapting to new realities. Decisions about structure, discipline, and expansion required careful discernment. She frequently gathered her council to reflect on how best to protect the integrity of their mission while remaining responsive to global needs. There were also criticisms leveled against her, particularly from some journalists and academics who questioned the quality of medical care at her homes or the financial transparency of donations. Some accused her of glorifying suffering or being too rigid in her moral teachings. Mother Teresa rarely responded to these attacks directly. Instead, she chose silence or pointed humility, saying, "I am not here to make people comfortable, but to help them be loved." Despite the criticism and physical weakness, she remained engaged in her work well into her late 80s. Even when confined to a wheelchair or hospital bed, she received guests, wrote letters, and gave spiritual guidance. She continued to pray daily with her sisters and offered her remaining strength in service of God and the poor. Her resilience became a quiet testimony to the power of love and mission in the face of adversity. The final years of Mother Teresa's life were marked by a delicate balance between decline and devotion. Though her body grew increasingly frail, her heart remained unwaveringly tethered to the mission she had nurtured from a small group of sisters in Calcutta to a global network of compassion. Her days, though punctuated by hospital visits and medical interventions, continued to be filled with prayer, direction, and intimate connection with the people and causes closest to her soul. As she approached her 90th year, the physical toll of decades of intense service could no longer be ignored. Her movements slowed, and she relied more on others to carry out the logistical aspects of the mission. Still, her presence, whether seated in her modest room or visiting a nearby house of the poor, radiated a sense of peace and purpose. Those who encountered her during these years often spoke of a palpable serenity that seemed to surround her, even amid suffering. In 1996, Mother Teresa's health entered a critical phase. She was hospitalized several times that year for heart and lung complications. She underwent surgery and battled pneumonia. enduring multiple close calls that alarmed her congregation and the wider world. Yet, every time she returned from a hospital stay, she resumed her work with a quiet resolve, as if each day were a new opportunity to love and serve. Recognizing her declining strength, Mother Teresa began to prepare for the inevitable transition of leadership within the Missionaries of Charity. With humility and foresight, she convened her council and oversaw the selection of her successor, Sister Nirmala Joshi, in early 1997. The decision ensured the continuation of the Order's mission in the spirit with which it had been founded. Mother Teresa's endorsement gave Sister Nirmala the trust and confidence needed to carry forward the legacy of compassionate service. In her final months, Mother Teresa spent more time in quiet reflection. Although unable to maintain her once rigorous routine, she remained deeply involved in the life of the community. She continued to meet with sisters, offering words of encouragement, prayer, and wisdom. She spoke often of forgiveness, mercy, and fidelity, values that had formed the foundation of her own life. Visitors from around the world, including dignitaries and the destitute alike, came to bid her farewell. On September 5, 1997, Mother Teresa passed away at the age of 87 in the mother house of the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta. Her death sent ripples across the globe. From Vatican City to the slums she had called home, tributes poured in. The people she had served, the sick, the homeless, the forgotten, mourned her not just as a leader, but as a mother. Political leaders, religious figures, and ordinary citizens alike paused to reflect on a life lived in radical love and selflessness. Her funeral was a state event in India, a rare honor for a religious figure of foreign origin. Thousands lined the streets of Calcutta to pay their respects. Yet, even amid the grandeur of the ceremony, the simplicity she had always embodied remained at its core. Her body was laid in a plain wooden casket, carried by the very people she had loved and served. It was a farewell that mirrored her life, humble, honest, and deeply human. In the years following her death, Mother Teresa's legacy only grew more profound. The Missionaries of Charity continued their work across the globe, expanding into war zones, disaster areas, and neglected corners of society. Her spiritual writings, once private, began to circulate, revealing the depths of her struggle and the strength of her commitment. Schools, hospitals, and humanitarian awards began to bear her name, honoring the immense impact she had made. Pope John Paul II, who had shared a close friendship with her, fast-tracked the process of her canonization. In 2003, just 6 years after her death, she was beatified, and in 2016, Pope Francis declared her a saint. These recognitions, while significant in the Catholic Church, were only formal affirmations of what millions around the world already believed, that she had lived an extraordinary life of holiness and love. The years following Mother Teresa's death were not a time of silence, but of echoes of her voice, her presence, and her work rippling outward into the world she had touched so deeply. Her canonization would become a pivotal milestone, not only for the Catholic Church, but for a global community still grappling with poverty, division, and a hunger for authentic compassion. While her earthly journey had ended, her influence surged forward, taking on new forms through the lives she had inspired. The process of canonization, traditionally a lengthy and intricate journey, moved with remarkable swiftness in Mother Teresa's case. Within 2 years of her death, Pope John Paul II waived the customary 5-year waiting period and opened the cause for her beatification. This exceptional measure underscored not only the Church's recognition of her sanctity, but also the urgency felt by millions who saw in her a living saint. The world's devotion to her life had already taken root. Canonization would simply confirm what many already believed. In 2003, she was beatified in a ceremony attended by thousands at St. Peter's Square. Beatification required the recognition of one miracle attributed to her intercession: a miraculous healing of a woman suffering from a terminal abdominal tumor in India. The Vatican's thorough investigation concluded that no scientific explanation could account for the recovery, opening the way for her beatification as Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. The event reinvigorated discussions not just of her legacy, but of what holiness looked like in the modern world. A second miracle, involving the inexplicable healing of a Brazilian man with multiple brain abscesses, was confirmed by the Vatican in 2015. This cleared the final hurdle for her canonization. On September 4, 2016, nearly 19 years after her death, Mother Teresa was officially declared a saint by Pope Francis. The ceremony, attended by pilgrims, clergy, and heads of state from across the globe, emphasized her commitment to serving Jesus in the poorest of the poor. It was a formal seal on a life already revered for its radical humility and unwavering service. But Mother Teresa's canonization was more than a religious ritual. It was a cultural event. Across continents, people of diverse faiths and ideologies paused to honor her example. Streets were renamed in her memory. Art exhibitions, musical compositions, and literary tributes celebrated her life. In classrooms and conferences, her name became synonymous with charity lived through direct human contact. She had become a moral compass, particularly for a younger generation searching for meaning in a digital, disconnected age. In the years that followed, her teachings were increasingly incorporated into humanitarian, educational, and spiritual frameworks. Her words, simple yet powerful, became slogans for service organizations, youth programs, and even secular initiatives. Phrases like, "Do it anyway," and "If you judge people, you have no time to love them," appeared on posters, social media, and textbooks. Her philosophy of love and action found resonance in unexpected places: in refugee camps, inner-city schools, corporate responsibility workshops, and policy forums. The missionaries of charity, her spiritual and organizational legacy, continued to flourish. They expanded their outreach to include victims of human trafficking, natural disasters, and war. Their centers multiplied across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The sisters, still clad in the white and blue sari, became visual reminders of her enduring mission, living amidst those most abandoned, not to preach, but to serve. Mother Teresa's impact also began to take root in secular humanitarian thought. Her model of proximity, serving through direct, physical presence rather than distant aid, was studied in sociology and ethics courses. Non-governmental organizations adopted her relational approach, emphasizing dignity over charity and presence over procedure. Scholars and critics alike debated her choices, but all acknowledged her rare ability to bring global attention to those rendered invisible by society. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Mother Teresa lies in the invisible seeds she planted in countless hearts. Volunteers who once worked beside her went on to found charities, reform prison systems, adopt children from slums, and bring care to rural hospitals. Some entered religious life. Others returned to secular paths, changed by her example. For many, even a fleeting encounter with her transformed their understanding of human worth and the moral responsibility to love beyond convenience. Saint Teresa of Calcutta remains a beacon of light in a world often overwhelmed by shadows. Her life was not extraordinary in the conventional sense. She possessed no wealth, no political power, no formal theological pedigree. Yet, by daring to love fully, to suffer silently, and to act decisively, she changed the world. Her canonization was not an endpoint, but a point of renewal, a call to every person in every place to make love visible through service, one small act at a time.